Albert Breer is back with us. Albert, thanks for having the patience here for us. Let's go back to Lamar Jackson. You don't think that it was calculated. You think it was just coincidental?
No, I think it was calculated.
Oh, okay.
I think, Dan, if you're Lamar and you've been hearing for, 6 weeks now, how you're stumbling around and you have no idea what you're doing and you need to hire an agent. Like, if you have to hear all of that over and over and over again, how you're messing this whole thing up and blowing all of this money, like, you might want to do something to send a message, right? And you might want to do something that's cold and cunning and calculating like a team would do, right? So, like, just to set the scene for you yesterday, it was about 7:45 a.m. local time that John Harbaugh sat down at his table with the media around him. And obviously, because of the situation, he's got a big crowd. I think it was about 90 seconds after that Lamar Jackson sent that tweet out. And if you think about it, like, the trade request didn't just go in, it went in over 3 weeks ago. So is it coincidental that it's happening in this 1 hour? No, you know what I mean? It's like John Harbaugh was sitting there for actually not even an hour, a half hour with the media. And 90 seconds into that half hour, he hit send on the tweet. So,
but what purpose does it serve, though, Albert?
It sends a message. I mean, it makes, like, the whole thing is like, I feel like a lot of times in these situations, the way teams make players uncomfortable is they sit there and do nothing. And they say, eventually you're going to squirm and eventually you're going to move. It's a negotiating tactic. So if they're trying to make you feel uncomfortable, well, then it's on you to make them feel uncomfortable back, And so I do think that this was an effort to turn up the heat on the Ravens by Lamar Jackson and his camp. And it's a very, very small circle. And I actually look at it like that was probably a smart thing to do. Like, from a negotiating standpoint, that's what a team would do to a player, right? Like, they would do something to make the player feel uncomfortable if they felt like the player had the advantage in that situation. And so I guess after 3 months of there not being, enough movement, and, we've all heard about what's happened over the last week with, an advisor of Lamar's calling around to teams, and I can verify that's happened. I think it just got to the point where Lamar felt like he had to do something to turn the heat up on the Ravens. This, I think, was a pretty smart way to do it.
Okay. Do you have to give up 2 first-round picks? Is this negotiable? If, let's say, the Colts go, we want Lamar Jackson. Can we give you a first and a third, and we're going to pay him whatever we're going to pay him?
I mean, you could. If you want to talk to the Ravens, you could go to the Ravens and ask for that. But if you do that before the draft, aren't the Ravens going to ask for the 4th pick?
Sure.
Like, to me, like, the smart move, and I think the Colts are one of the teams in the top 10 that could consider this, and I think there are other teams that maybe should consider this that are in the top 10.
Like who?
There's no, like, if you're, I know Atlanta's not going to do it, but should they consider it? They should look at it,
Absolutely.
And here's the thing, right? Like, if you're one of these teams, if you're Indianapolis and you're saying to yourself, we want to go through the full process with the quarterbacks. And I can tell you for a fact, like, when Chicago called them about, dealing the first pick and they had some discussion on it, the Colts weren't there on the quarterbacks yet. They weren't there with one of the quarterbacks yet. So, like, I think it stands to reason that they're not going to be comfortable with whoever falls to them at 4. So if you're the Colts, you don't want to give up the 4th pick for Lamar. What do? What you can do is you could wait until after the draft. You could use the 4th pick on, I don't know, Will Anderson, a great defensive player, and then get past the draft. And by the way, when you get past the draft, you're not talking about the 4th pick anymore. You're talking about a 2024 first-round pick and a 2025 first-round pick. And if you still think Lamar's a great player like he has been the first 5 years of his career, and you can find a way to keep him healthy, like, we could be talking about the 25th pick in the draft next year. You know what I mean? Like, so it's no longer the 4th pick. So I think that there are teams in the top 10 that are not comfortable with this group of quarterbacks, with the 4 quarterbacks who are, expected to go in the first round. And they really might not be comfortable with the quarterbacks that fall to them, wherever they're picking inside the top 10. So this could be an alternative where you can use your top 10 pick on another player if you're willing to wait, and then sign Lamar Jackson to an offer sheet after the draft where you wouldn't be spending this year's pick. You'd be spending picks over the next 2 years, which, you'd figure if Lamar Jackson is on your team, it'd be a much lower pick than the one you have this year.
What about the Patriots?
It's a lot of fun, isn't it?
But they're irrelevant. I mean, they don't have anything there. There's no juice whatsoever. And Belichick's talking about what happened, the last 25 years. Hey, moving forward. This guy never talks about what's in the rearview mirror. But if you want to keep
Here's
up,
what I know.
okay.
Well, no, here's what I know, Dan. Like Bill has had opportunity after opportunity to like get Mac Jones's back over the last 6 months, going all the way back to the Bailey Zappi thing in October and the way that that thing blew up. He hasn't done it. Like it's constantly been, he hasn't declared him a starter. When he's asked about there being a competition between Jones and Zappi, he says, well, like all things are sort of open. Every position is open. He's had opportunity after opportunity to back Mac Jones and he hasn't done it. And then the owner comes out and publicly speaks about Lamar Jackson yesterday and the whole Meek Mill thing and everything else. What I know about Bill is he loves players like this, that like the reason he went and got Randy Moss is because you couldn't find another one of them. And if you think about how Bill came up, that's what Lawrence Taylor was. Like, and if you've ever heard Bill, and Dan, I'm sure you've heard Bill talk about Lawrence Taylor, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like he's talking about Michael Jordan when he like talks about who he was as a player and everything else. Lamar's sort of that way. Now, I'm not saying Lamar's Lawrence Taylor and like is going to go down with that sort of legacy, but when you're talking about just how unique he is and how different he is, and how if you're Bill, you create so much stress on the opponent with this one player. Like, I think that all appeals to him. And the idea of what he could do creatively, maybe in his last act as an NFL head coach, all of it lines up. Now, do I think it's going to happen? Probably not. But it's a fun idea. And it's one that like you look at it like yesterday, again, this just like Bill had the opportunity and has had the opportunity to declare Mac Jones his starter over the last 6 months and didn't do it. He also had the chance, and Robert Kraft did too, to shoot the Lamar Jackson thing out of the sky yesterday, and neither of them did that either.
He's Albert Breer, the senior NFL reporter, Monday Morning Quarterback. What are the Packers saying here? What is Brian Gutekunst trying to tell us with Aaron Rodgers?
I think that they're sick and tired of this whole thing. I mean, I think you can hear it in Gutekunst's voice. I had a feeling it might go this way and it would turn into Aaron says one thing happened, the Packers say another thing happened, and who knows what the truth is, but what it really reveals is how deep the wounds are here, right? Between the two sides. And I go back to like what happened a couple of years ago. And you remember the press conference when, Aaron showed up at the beginning of training camp, right? And he got up there and I think it went on like a 20-minute monologue and basically like detailed everything. And like there was a lot of, I would say, dirty laundry aired there. Well, the Packers had no idea that was going to happen. The Packers thought that everything had been settled and, okay, we're good. We're in lockstep. We're moving forward. And I know there were people in the Packers organization that were stunned when that went down. They swallowed it. Last year, what did they do for him? They said, okay, Aaron, we're going to leave the light on for you. Take your time, make your decision, do everything you need to do. And we're here for you. We want you as our quarterback. I just think that there's a fatigue there for the Packers on like with bending over backwards over the last couple of years to accommodate him. And now even on the way out, like he does this, it's like his last act as a Packer is like, it feels like kind of pointing the finger back at the organization. Like, this is why this is happening. So I think you see how deep the wounds are here. And, I think Aaron actually probably could have made it easier on himself if he had just gone on McAfee a couple of weeks ago and said, you know what? And look, it's great content. I'm not telling anybody not to do what Aaron did, but because it's great for all of us, it's good for business. I'm sure for you guys too. But I think like if Aaron's like singular goal was to get himself to the Jets, he could have said, "Look, I appreciate everything that Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur and Mark Murphy have done for me over the last couple of years. It didn't work out, but I'll have great memories of it, and I think it's just time for everybody to move on." I think that this is the tone and tenor of this is a lot different, and I actually think that he's probably on the Jets now. And so I think cooler heads will eventually prevail. But, I think part of this is, the Packers sort of cleaning up everything, the mess of the last couple of weeks, and then trying to get, the best value they can for him. And I think you started to see yesterday them coming off their position just a little bit and saying, maybe we don't need to insist on a 13th overall pick.
Most interesting possible rule change is what?
The gambling one, I think, and this isn't an on-field rule change, but the gambling one's really interesting to me. For those who don't know, they're going to allow sports books in stadiums. They're voting on it. They're going to allow sports books in stadiums to operate on game day. which, I mean, given that we can all do this on our phones now, doesn't seem like a big deal. But if you had told me that there'd be a sports book in, 20 NFL stadiums in 2023, 10 years ago, my jaw would have hit the floor. You know what I mean? Like, so I think from a global perspective and just kind of the business of the game and everything else, that's probably the biggest rule change. As far as the on-field stuff, I think the continued elimination of the punt and kickoff is probably the biggest one. You know what I mean? Like, and I had Mike Westhoff, and Westy coached. He's back with the Broncos now, but has coached special teams in the league going back to like the mid '80s. He gave me this number that was just incredible. He said that over his first 30 years in the NFL, there were an average of, I think it was 22 special teams plays, excluding extra points and field goals per game. He said by the time he got to his last year with the Saints, which I believe was 2018, that number was down to 7. So, you think about like how that changes the way the game is played. That changes the way that rosters are made up, like the value of special teams players. I mean, think about this, Dan, like how long, it wasn't that long ago that like some of the biggest stars in the game were kick returners. Dante Hall, Devin Hester. How many kick returners can you name right now?
Cordero Patterson, I think.
Right. And Keyshawn Nixon from the Packers is the other one. And I think I just learned his name last year. You know what I mean?
But how do we get rid of the punt?
I think that they're going to continue to, I would say, incentivize fair catches. Like their injury data is that, and this is all health and safety stuff, obviously, but their injury data shows that like there's a higher likelihood, of high-end collisions and injuries resulting from them on kickoffs and punts. Punts are a little more difficult, I would say, to eliminate. But I do think that's, I do think finding ways to incentivize just non-returns, I think is the way that they're going to do it. And then even like the onside kick, and I don't think this rule proposal is going to pass, but I'm sure you've seen it. Philly's rule proposal, that in lieu of the onside kick, I think you'd do like, I think this year they proposed a 4th and 20 from the 20, which is a really interesting, fun idea. But I just feel like it sort of bastardizes what football has always been. So I know for a lot of the coaches that, are involved in these things, is trying to strike the balance between prioritizing the health and safety part of it while also trying to preserve what the makeup of the game is. And again, like, these sorts of rules changes can affect who has jobs and who doesn't. You know what I mean? Like it can affect like how much a special teams coach makes. It can affect the bottom 13 guys in your roster. What do those guys look like? All of those sorts of things are impacted by this.
Okay, the most interesting lobby rumor, not story, rumor. Do you got one?
Yeah, I just trying to think. Lobby rumor. God, that's a tough one. See, I'm trying to think of what I can share. I think the way the top of the draft shakes out, to me is really, really interesting now. And I would say the divide between Bryce Young and CJ Stroud and then Will Levis and Anthony Richardson is a little bigger than most people think when you're talking about like the general consensus of the NFL. And so I think Stroud and Young in some order go 1 and 2. I think the other thing is like how special Young is as a player. Like you sort of hear that too. But I think Stroud and Young go 1, 2 in some order. And then I think it's sort of up in the air because I do think that there are teams in the top 10 that aren't wild about this quarterback class. And again, like what makes it so interesting is the idea that some team in the top 10 could feel that way about the quarterback class and then turn around after the draft and roll the dice and sign Lamar Jackson to an offer sheet, even though there is the risk that the Ravens could just match and you wouldn't wind up with a player.
I was looking for something more salacious than that.
I'm just trying to think. I mean,
How
don't
about
know.
just make something up, Hey, great to talk to you as always.
Ask me, you know what, Dan, like next time I'm on, ask me and I'll have had a chance to process everything and I'll have something better for you. That was a crappy rumor.
It was. You're such a great journalist that you don't deal with rumor and innuendo.
Well, I mean, there are a couple of things, but it's like I can't really talk about that. I can't really.
How about with no name?
No name?
No team?
Yeah, I would say
I don't want to get you in trouble. I don't want to get. I don't want to get you in trouble.
Yeah, I would just come back to me.
Okay,
Come back.
all right.
I thought about that one. I thought about that. You put that on the table. I'm like,
No,
like
no.
it'd be like a page 6, like blind item or whatever. Right?
Whoa, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Tom Brady dating, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I Tom Brady, Las Vegas Raider by the end of the year next year. We'll see.
Thank you, Albert. That's
All right.
Albert Breer, the Monday morning quarterback. I don't want to get him in trouble. He's such a nice guy.